Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and today we're going to be doing a Scottish episode. So let's get started, shall we? Bible John is touted as a Scottish serial killer, but who he actually is remains a mystery, making his victims unsolved homicides. He struck in Glasgow in the 1960s, picking up 3 women from the Barrowland Ballroom. The women had more than that in common. Other than the pickup site, they were all mothers, all menstruating, all beaten, strangled, and dumped. The trophy in each case appeared to be their handbag, and they were never recovered. The first was Patricia Docker, a slim and 5'3" tall 25-year-old. She was the daughter of John Wilson and Pauline. Her father John was a Royal Air Force electronics engineer, and as such, when she was young, she spent time in Singapore, where her father was stationed, later moving back to Glasgow. At 19, Patricia married her own military man, Alexander Docker, a senior aircraft man. They had one son, Sandy, and lived in Cyprus, where Alex was based. The marriage hit a bad spot, and the two ended up separating. Patricia moved from living with him in Lincolnshire back to Glasgow, along with her son. Upon moving back to Glasgow, Patricia began working at the Mearnskirk Hospital in Renfrewshire as an auxiliary nurse, taking a night shift position. This allowed her mother to watch her son, and she could be home with him during the day. On February 22nd, 1968, she left her son in the care of her parents and went to meet with friends from work at the Majestic Ballroom. The group started the evening there, and most sources say after shutting it down at around 10:30, Patricia continued on to the Barrowland Ballroom, though now she was solo. Several witnesses later would remember her in a yellow dress and that she danced with multiple men throughout the evening. No one came forward with information on when she left, but the ballroom shut down by 11:30 p.m. The next morning, Morris Goodman was walking to his car to head to work. He was less than 400 meters from Patricia's house when he found her nude body. He immediately notified authorities. 2 traffic officers in the area arrived first by about 8 a.m., and homicide detectives followed. Detective Sergeant Andrew Johnston and Detective Constable Norman MacDonald. They noted Patricia was lying on her back with a single shoe on. She was beaten, with her face and head covered in bruises, along with bruising around her neck, suggesting she had been strangled. Autopsy would later confirm she was beaten, the weapon, a person's fists and boots. It's also noted that she was menstruating at the time she was killed. A door-to-door canvass yielded no information, minus one woman who claimed to have heard another woman yell, quote, "Leave me alone," end quote, twice, but wasn't sure the time, just that it was early. The same evening that Patricia was killed, a journalist was having a party, and many of the attendees stayed until the morning hours. Even they claimed not to have seen anything suspicious. With no ID on her, she was a Jane Doe. But as she made it to Victoria Hospital, an ambulance driver saw her and believed she was a nurse that he knew. The confirmation was made Saturday when Patricia's father went to the police to report she had not come home Thursday night. John identified his daughter, now lying on a table in the morgue. Police searched a river approximately 100 meters from where she was originally found. In the White Cart water, they found her handbag and bracelet. Her clothing was not recovered. Quickly, however, her case went cold. Police at the time reported crudely on Patricia, purportedly stating, quote, "appears to enjoy the company of men," end quote, and described her as, quote, "an only child and apparently rather spoiled," end quote. Then, on August 16, 1969, Jemima, or Mimi MacDonald, a 32-year-old woman, went out. Mimi had 3 children and lived in Bridgington, which was relatively close to the Barrowland Ballroom. She lived in an apartment in the same complex as her sister, Margaret, and on August 16th dropped off her children to be looked after while she was out. The night she went out, it was a 25 and older night. Prior to hitting the Barrowland, she stopped at Gallowgate, a bar. She had a couple drinks, and later in the investigation, several witnesses reported her talking to a tall, slim, red hair or fair haired man in a suit. At Barrowland, several more witnesses recalled her dancing with a man with a short haircut and a suit, which was contrary to the style at the time of longer hair and casual clothing. When the ballroom closed, Mimi was seen leaving with the man, and several witnesses saw them begin to walk away together. Last seen at 12:30 along London Road, turning off to Landressy Street. Mimi's destination was under a mile from Barrowland. On Sunday, when Mimi hadn't picked up her children, Margaret was concerned. She began hearing rumors that there was a body in the tenement, an abandoned building down the road from her apartments, and that made her worry worse. When Mimi didn't show up on Monday, Margaret went to the tenement. Others were already there, and that's where she found her. Mimi was lying in a bed recess, her dress torn and face covered with blood. She called the police and detectives arrived, again noting the significant damage to her face and head. She was strangled with her own stocking. Her sanitary pad was lying next to her. In this case, her handbag and headscarf were missing from the location. An autopsy confirmed Mimi was killed early Sunday. Again, a door-to-door investigation began. One woman thought she heard a woman scream that night, but was unsure when. Stated that someone who looked like Mimi was talking to a man at approximately 12:40 a.m. As she was known to be at Barrowland, police went back to the scene. Management cooperated with the investigation and even made requests for those who were there that night to return and speak with police. On August 23rd, police staged a reenactment of Mimi's walk home, but nothing came from it. From the Barrowland and other witnesses, a description came of a man between 25 and 30 with sandy or red hair. He was slim, pale-faced, and overly dressed, and tall, but no one recognized him. On August 21st, the local news realized the similarities, prompting a detective to state, quote, "There are one or two similarities between both murders. I cannot say more than that point at the moment," end quote. After leads started to dry up in the second case, the head of the City of Glasgow Police CID, Detective Chief Superintendent Tom Goodall, approached George Lennox Patterson. George was the deputy director of Glasgow School of Art and was a known portrait painter. He asked if it would be possible to create a sketch based on all of the witnesses' descriptions. A composite sketch, the first in Scottish history. On August 26, it was completed and immediately released to the press. Even with the portrait bolstered with £100 reward raised by Mimi's family, the case still rapidly went cold. Again, however, police bias showed. According to the notes in police files, they reported, quote, "appeared to be extremely fond of male company," end quote, that she had been in Barrowland Dance Hall 3 nights in a row in the week before her murder, and was, quote, "in receipt of public funds plus maintenance from the fathers of her children," end quote. On October 30th, 1969, Helen Puddock was a 29-year-old mother. According to BBC News, quote, "Helen had worked on the buses and been a farrier and bookie. When a romance broke up, she went down to stay with her brother in Reading. That was where she met her husband, George Puddock, a lance corporal in the Royal Corps of Signals. The two 23-year-olds married on March 24th. The couple had 2 children, David and Michael. And when George was sent to Germany, his family followed on. But Helen didn't like it there and returned to live with her mother in Earl Street, Glasgow, in mid-March 1969, end quote. She did in turn return to Glasgow with her children, living with her mother in the Scotstoun area. On October 30th, George was in town in an attempt to save their marriage. But Helen wasn't having it. Helen decided that evening to go out with her sister. George ended up giving her 10 shillings for a taxi ride home. Helen and her sister Jean left at around 8 p.m. They went to a couple pubs, then met up with more friends at the Trader's Tavern, after which the group went to Barrowland. Jean almost immediately met a man named John. Helen was speaking with a tall, slim young man, supposedly also named John. The four began dancing. At the end of the night, Jean tried to buy cigarettes from a machine, but the machine took her money and produced nothing. Helen's John spoke with the manager to get Jean's money back. Jean reported, quote, "He wasn't outraged or shouting. He was collected and very calm, but assertive. It was like a schoolteacher speaking to a young child. He was giving the manager a real dressing down. I expected him to get a good hiding for the way he spoke to the manager. But to my surprise, nothing happened, and the manager seemed to back off." End quote. Jean's John bid the group adieu when the group stepped outside. Jean, Helen, and Helen's John all got into a taxi, riding 20 minutes to Scottston. But John seemed irritated, and Jean reported that she thought it was because she joined the cab ride. In the taxi, Jean tried talking with John, who told her he didn't like married women going to ballrooms. She shifted to asking about New Year's plans, and he said he didn't have any, but he was going to pray that night. As the taxi got into town, John had the driver go to Jean's home first, though it was further than Helen's, and as she got out, John slammed the door. The two then drove back towards Helen's, stopping short of the home where they both got out. Helen purportedly began walking off while John paid. This is according to the driver. He also reported dropping the pair off at around 12:30 to 12:45 a.m. At 2 a.m., a night bus picked up a man approximately 2.5 miles away. He had a muddied jacket and a scratch below his eye. He departed a few stops later. At 7:30, Archibald McIntyre took his dog out behind the tenement buildings. His dog immediately went to a bundle on the ground, and as Archibald came close, he realized it was the body of a woman who had a bloodied face. He immediately called police. They arrived and noted a bloodied woman with torn-up clothing and a pair of stockings still wrapped around her neck. Her handbag was also missing. A police caravan was set up outside, and during that morning Helen's husband showed up, expressing concern that his wife went out dancing the night before and never came home. George described Helen's outfit to the police, who in turn notified him it was likely Helen laying there. Autopsy showed once again Helen was beaten, raped, and strangled. She too was menstruating at the time she was murdered, and her pad was left under her armpit. In addition, unlike the previous two, bite marks were found on her arm. Police spoke with Jean, who described John as having good teeth, except the two front were crooked and overlapped, and one tooth was missing on the upper right side. He wore a metal badge that she noted him rubbing frequently throughout the night. On November 4th, 1969, the Glasgow Herald ran a story with the headline, "Bible-quoting man sought by murder Hunt police," and the next day his moniker was formed, Bible John. His information was wildly disseminated. Police first believed him to be a service member owing to his short hair and the time gap between the first two women's attacks. Detectives received over 50,000 witness statements. People were calling and reporting their neighbors by the hundreds, to the point that police were issuing cards that stated, quote, "I am not Bible John," end quote. According to The Guardian, quote, "The initial investigation was one of the largest ever inquiries in Scottish history, with police interviewing 7,000 people, taking 4,000 statements, and putting out notorious photo fits of the suspected killer, who was known as Bible John due to him quoting scripture during a taxi journey with Puddock and her sister before she was murdered. No arrests were ever made." End quote. In early 1970, the Scottish Daily Record went to a Dutch psychic and parapsychologist, Gerald Croiset, to help. Gerald had been reported as a man who had helped the Dutch police many times before, but he ended up not giving any information of value while advising them. Nothing happened for years as far as movement forward. In 1972, Detective Superintendent Joe Beatty reported, quote, "It is quite incredible that this man has eluded us. I am positive this man comes from Glasgow or nearby, end quote. The case remained unsolved. According to Scotland News, the police regularly review the case. In recent years, scrutiny over the investigation has surfaced. According to BBC, quote, detectives describe these women as being highly promiscuous, fond of male company, and liking the attention of men, end quote. It was blatant misogyny. These victims of murder were being judged and blamed for what happened to them because they had simply gone out dancing and, had a few drinks, flirted with a few men. Many believe it hindered the investigation to a fault. There were, however, multiple suspects that were investigated throughout the years. This included 2 different Johns. One of them ended up committing suicide in later years, and his body was exhumed at the advent of DNA evidence, which was tested against semen found in Helen's stocking. He was ruled out after that. Another was Peter Tobin, who would be found guilty of murder years later, after killing a young woman in a church and hiding her body under the floorboards. And while he remains behind bars, I have yet to find any sources stating that they obtained DNA samples, let alone tested it against that found on Helen's stocking either. And unfortunately, that concludes the unsolved case of Bible John, one of Scotland's biggest unsolved mysteries. So, to all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.